Paul Polman. Seated next to him is Barima Konare, who's the founder and managing director of the Bantili Communication Group in Mali. And finally, last and certainly not least, somebody we know within the business and economic fraternity across Africa is Carlos Lopez, who is the Under Secretary General and Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Why are we talking about from 2015 to 2063? I'll give you a brief context, but I'm sure you're all aware of it. In year 2000, human development took its rightful place center stage within broader conversations around enhancing growth on the African continent. It was at this time that the Millennium Development Goals were identified and a timetable was set that we should have achieved most of these goals by the year 2015. Now, whilst there have been many advances, there have also been many setbacks. And unfortunately, the 2015 deadline is most probably not going to be met. Taking cognizance of this, the African Union last year decided that we should be targeting the next 50 years as an era of human development. And using the Millennium Development Goals as building blocks, they decided to introduce to us Agenda 2063, where these goals would be prioritized but enhanced by a much broader economic agenda. And the tone was set by the fact that for the last decade or so, Africa's been on a steady growth trajectory, so the progress can be seen and tracked. So now we have Agenda 2063. The economy will give substance to the very basis of these MDGs. It's going to be focusing on job creation, creating and setting the right infrastructure to enhance economic development, boosting agriculture where many of our compatriots are employed, and basically just empowering the individual African to be able to meet those development goals in their own lives through their own capacity, so the enabling environment. So what we're here to do today is to discuss how this Agenda 2063, having built upon the Millennium Development Goals of 2000, how all of that can be given traction and turned into a very tangible and palpable reality. And I think having captains of industry, heads of state, and very accomplished technical ministers in government were able to have a broad conversation about what can and cannot be done. So, without further ado, what I'm going to ask our panelists is this general question. We know that there's about 8 Millennium Development Goals. I'd like you to choose one where you think Africa has probably done well in pursuing it, and one or two where you think Africa really needed to have concentrated its energies, but has probably failed. So if I had to choose one for myself, it's the question of universal primary education and empowering the girl child. That for me would be the ultimate priority for Africa. For you, President Sall, what should Africa have focused on as an MDG?
Je vous remercie, Madame, et je voudrais...
Thank you, Ma. And I'd like to greet the panelists and the public here present. Now, to respond directly to your question, I'd like to just indicate that education is one of the Millennium Development Goals. These goals, my country, Senegal, has invested a lot in this because we are conscious that this is a cross-cutting issue that goes beyond the issue of yield and productivity, because the investment in education can only yield fruits on a long term. So there is, you have the primary education, and efforts have been made for the last 10 years so that the access to education, universal access to education, should be a reality in Senegal. You have the education rate that is at a level that is more than 95%. So this is that we have a particularity in African Muslim countries, because everything that is relates to Islamic education is not taken into account in our statistics, which means that if we have to take into account the children that are in Quranic schools or the French Arabic school, which means the percentage will be higher than what I've just indicated. So in Senegal, our goal could be attained by 2015 if we maintain the momentum with regards to access. We also change our approach by combining the issue of quality of education. We can say quality, there is access to education, but if the access is that about 50% are not in the system after 5 years, that means the result is going to be attained. Now we have a new program, which is a package of access with regards to equity and transparency, so that the educational system in Senegal will become a situation whereby you have access to education, you have access of education to young girls, and then we almost have parity in our country, and we have affirmative action for girls, and we also put emphasis on quality of the education. So in view of the objectives of our development, we are thinking of professional training. We're thinking of professional training. We're thinking more of having professions. We're thinking of vocational training, and we're thinking of professionalizing education.
Minister, I know that you can be quite critical, so I'm going to ask you to do that for me. Where has Africa failed?
Well, where has Africa failed? You asked us to focus on the MDGs. And I'll go from there too. Well, before I say where Africa has failed, since we are in depressed times, I hope we remember where Africa is succeeding as well, and that we talk about that. But for me, I think education is crucial. I want to agree with His Excellency, the President of Senegal, on that, and with you on your observation, because really, if you educate girls and women, then you take care of a whole lot of problems, as he has said. So that's critical. But I think one area I'd like to highlight and be more critical where we are failing is on maternal mortality. Why do I say that? I say that because that's where we really do have answers to that. We know what to do. We have the technology to make sure that women do not die in childbirth. And yet, we have very high maternal mortality numbers, including here in Nigeria. And I think that saving lives is vital. There is no reason a woman should die in childbirth today. It is something easily tackled. So that's one area in the MDGs. And I think as we move to the post-2015, because I was also in the high-level panel for the post-2015, this is one of those areas where we said we must continue the work that was not accomplished under the earlier MDGs and complete it, because we have no excuse. That's why I say that that is one of the difficult ones, along with infant mortality. Now, you know, moving from there, what else am I critical? Actually, didn't I was said to be critical. I thought I was said to be bullish, too bullish. But I think where we are failing is that we have this rising continent, rising Africa. But the issue of inequality, we haven't focused on it with the kind of laser beam we need to, and we need to do that. Because even as we're growing, I'll take Nigeria as an example. We've been growing rapidly, but our Gini coefficient that measures inequality has also been increasing. If you look across Africa, you see that Nigeria is, let's say, at 0.49, South Africa is at 0.63, Botswana 0.60. The closer you are to 1, the worse the inequality. And you look at across the continent, that is the one area we are not doing well. Second, the quality of growth. The fact that this inequality is increasing means that the quality of the growth we are delivering has to be improved. So we must look at sectors, one, that will include many more people, and that's why agriculture, since we all have the potential on the continent to do well, is crucial. Agriculture is 3 times more effective in lifting people out of poverty than any other sector. So trying to do what we're doing here in Nigeria, where we've now turned our sights to making agriculture attractive for young people and making it a business, and they're all more enthusiastic, and helping them along the value chain, not just to produce, but also to sell. That is critically important. Final point I want to make is, all of this is wrapped up in an analysis that McKinsey has just done of the Nigerian economy, which illustrates what is happening in Africa. And what they have shown is that whilst we are growing, there's a productivity gap. And that productivity gap is made up of 2 essential things. One is 3. One is the infrastructure gap, which we all have and we've talked about long on the continent. The second